honestly feel like your opening line should be like, we should talk about the elephant in the room.
What's the elephant in the room? Like, what's the elephant?
That is funny. I'm so proud of myself today. Oh my goodness. I say I have started a new work in progress. Me having started is just opening up a Google Doc and titling it. I'm like, I have started. Yay. And so I
Good
was so
job,
proud of
Nell.
myself because, no, I haven't been writing in the past like 2 weeks because I just haven't been great, like emotionally. So I was just like, I'm not vibing with any of this. And I have a lot of art reads. So I was like, I better get reading. But then I texted Rose and I was like, okay, I need to write. When are we writing? And she's like, okay, I'm open today. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I was so proud of myself because I wrote like 544 words. So I was like,
Nice.
better than zero.
Last night in my writer group, there's one of the writers who is really struggling to finish his projects and to get sitting down and writing. So we've been giving him homework every week now because he's like, I need that accountability. So we've been giving him homework that to do and to get done by the time we meet the next week. And so far it's working. Hopefully it
I love
continues to
it.
work.
Hashtag writer groups.
They're great. Today I'm just drinking strawberry kiwi.
Refreshing. So today I
Mhm.
spiced it up a little bit. So I was really in the mood for coffee, but not like full coffee. So I decided to make myself a cafe mocha. So,
Looks good with your brown there on the lip.
yeah, the little chocolate, I know, right? It just goes straight to my tummy. Are we ready for this episode?
I think we're ready.
Hey ho, let's go. Welcome to Tea and Tales. We are so happy to have you here. I'm Madeleine Nijnaal.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. We especially want to thank Olivia James and Melanie Huyanga. Thank you so much for joining us each week. Today, we're going to talk about character names, how we pick them, how we find them, how much it hurts to change them. And joining us today is special guest Kasia Alba from Raising Baby Authors. Welcome, Kasia, to Tea and Tales. We're so excited to have you on our podcast. We've been on your podcast, so it's going to be so much fun to see those two episodes next to each other, I think.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, for inviting me. I'm super happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your journey of how you came to write romance.
Okay, I have never actually had to do this before, I believe. So let's see if I can be quick about it. I write actually under two pen names. So there is KK Alba, where I write full-length novels that none of them are published yet. And then there's K Red, where I actually have published one novella. I actually do have it here, just in case. It's called The Revenge Tale.
Perfect.
It's been published in September, and the new one is going to be published very soon as well, the Christmas one. And I've been writing for about, I would say, 3 years, I think. It's basically coinciding with the time when I started reading again as well. So the reading kind of brought on the writing, and then the bookstagram was along with all of it. And then somewhere in between there's also a podcast that I host for authors and writers. I started writing because at some point I realized I can. I kind of really like stories. I didn't know that I don't have to be very literary perfect in order to write. I assume that all the writers have this like perfect prose, and I'll need to get into bookstores and I'll need to get agents and stuff. And then I started reading for other authors, beta reading, arc reading. And I realized that there's so many stories and so many authors, and people write with hundreds of different styles, and my style could be there as well. I started working on my writing. I started writing stories. The first story was, I think for so many people, it's kind of very similar. You kind of build your first story around something that happened to you, or, write what you know. So that was my first draft, and now I'm moving on to other things as well.
A little bit of background. I am a terrible character name namer. Like, I have people come to me and they're like, oh, you're an author. I need names for this, or let's create names for that. And I go, okay. Good luck. I struggle with it the most of anything in the creation process. And so when a character tells me my name is this, I'm like, grab on both hands and I never let it go.
Funny enough, I don't have a hard time with female names. Like, I have an abundance of female names I can use. But male names, I have the hardest time finding male names. Either I would have a name that I would love, but then I've read novels and a majority of the character's name was those names. And I'm like, yeah, that feels a bit redundant. So I can't do that.
I don't know. Honestly, both female and male are kind of the same to me, but it's easier for me to find names for antagonists than protagonists because names for antagonists are mostly like the guys I hate, like the names I hate. But then it's also so weird. I name a very disgusting person a name, and then I read another romance where he's the main character with the same name. And I'm like, oops.
Well, okay, it's going to sound horrible, okay, but being a teacher is actually great for a writer because you get so many names each year of children that go through your classes and your school. Though, I must admit, the majority of names that I get from the kids at school are for my antagonists as well.
Yeah, it also is a little weird to take a name of the child that you know and make him your MMC. It's there are things that have to happen and it's just weird.
Funny enough, the novel that I'm currently writing, a female character, her name is of one of the kids that was in my class last year, and I was like, oh, that's such a pretty name. And then my male character is actually a kid that was also in my class last year, and I was like, oh, that's such a pretty name. So I was like, I mean, it fits so nicely, so why not?
I was wondering whether, like, first names are not that much of a big deal to me, but last names is a big problem. I don't know. Do you even care about your last names usually?
I think Sarah does a lot.
I've created whole cultures where there are no last names at all because I didn't want to create last names for everybody. But then in some of them, I create the intricate systems of why they have their last name, like what the purpose is behind the last name. But yeah, last names are hard. I think that's why I end up doing a lot of family sagas because I can come up with one last name and just use it for half the characters.
Also kind of depends on what type of character you have. So for one of my previous novels, it was a baking show. And I think with celebrities, I don't know about you, but I've never called Meryl Streep just Meryl. It's Meryl Streep. Like, it's just together. And so for me, because that character was a celebrity who was a judge, I was like, of course, he has to have a very, like, powerful, like, first and last name. Like, it has to just be, like, bam, in your face, like, you can't forget about it type of vibes. So I think it just really kind of depends on who the character is and how important that role is. Like, for example, also I had a character who was a detective. And in the police force, it's kind of known that they call each other by their last names rather than their first names. I think based on your character's career or job, that kind of will tell you, okay, how important is this last name kind of vibes?
In this one, in the holiday novella, actually, I had issues because I really needed to come up with this author's last name. Basically, it plays a role in two ways. She has a pen name, which kind of derives from her last name, and it's supposed to be a romancy pen name. So that was already a problem. And then also there's a bully kind of situation, and they gave her a nickname also based on her last name.
Yeah, that you made that difficult for yourself.
I know. It works eventually. Everything worked out, but then I had to, okay, this is a Christmas novella. I have to give the guy some, I don't know, ironic last name, Christmas related or winter related. And then her ex as well, like I needed to give him something disgusting. I'm not going to tell you the MCs, but the ex's last name was Roden. So Roden. And basically, when someone pronounces it in America, they say Roden. And the guy, who's very pretentious and annoying, he hates that because he always says that he's Rodin because he thinks it's sophisticated. Like, last names are really a big of an issue for me, much more than first names.
I love that perspective on it because sometimes I think we forget that you have to have two names. So we just use one name for a lot of our characters. For me, one of the places I take a lot of inspiration, I will listen for names while I'm walking through town, and it's less here than when I've been in like the DC area where you hear all kinds of different types of amazing names all the time. But I'll listen to people and their names. Like if I'm at a coffee shop, I want to know what your name is. Is it interesting? Is it cool? Or I'll be reading a news article. But the best name that I ever used, and somebody told me to change it, and I went, never changing that name. It's a character that I named Wombly. It's Native American, but it is the name of one of the kids that I foster cared 10 years ago who is really close to my heart. And when I created the character in the book, as I was writing that character, I went, that's your name. That's who you are. And it just kind of connected, and it's special to me that way. And so when somebody told me that's just a weird name and it sounds like wibbly woggly, like they're going to be teased their whole life, I'm like, maybe, but if you understood the name.
Do you explain it in the book? Why his name like that? What does that mean?
I don't really explain it in the book, and I just don't know if there would be a way to do that. But anybody who looked it up would realize that it means eagle in that Native
Mm.
American language. I use names that aren't common, and if somebody wants to know more about it, they can simply Google it, in my view.
Can I just say, I love that you just said that because my characters that I name, I love using names that are uncommon. If you don't like it, don't make your problem mine. I would be writing a name because, okay, a lot of times it's like a name I heard in my class and I was like, oh, that's a pretty name. Like Emilia. I'm like, oh, that's pretty. Or Femke. So many people come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, what does it mean? I'm like, it means Femke. What do you mean? What does it mean? I'm not one of those writers that go and Google, like, what is the meaning of this word? Nope, it's just a name. It's pretty to my ears. I'm like, that is all it is. I am not that deep into names. If you want to find some deep philosophical meaning in a name, don't go look for it in my book. It's not going to be there. You're going to create a character that's not even there.
That's funny because I think I'm the opposite way. Not in terms that I don't get crazy over character names. I'm writing these small books because I literally don't want to bother much with the names. I'm just using American names and American last names, and I set them in America. I at least named a couple of cities. In the first one, there's nothing about the location. So in my full length stuff that I'm writing, most of them are in an international environment. So one of them is set in Brussels with lots of international students, and the other series is also, it's set in Denmark, but there's also a ton of international people there. So I have to come up with names that sound good in the language of that person, that sound good in English. And sometimes when it's the main characters, I also bother with the meaning. The FMC that's basically based on me, in the very first draft that I wrote, I needed to give her a Belarusian name. I wanted it not to be Russian. I wanted it to be exactly Belarusian. So I found a name that sounds very nice, that has a meaning, and that sounds super well in English. I had to do the same for the MMC. The names of those characters, they got so much consideration. You have no idea, like the plotting of that was nothing comparing to like, how am I going to name these people? I've changed their nationalities back and forth, and then with nationalities the name changes as well, and then the personality changes, because I'm basing a lot of characters on my friends. My friend group is from everywhere, basically. I know people from most of the countries, so I'm like, should I pluck this kind of nationality for this character or change it to something else? And then everything also comes with the names.
Especially when you're writing in our world, you have to be able to pinpoint what nationality is this and be able to match the names to them, or people will be like, why do they have this Scandinavian name and they are South African? Like, you can get away with a French name in South Africa.
Can I just say though, so for example, do you know the singer Gwen Stefani?
Yeah.
Okay, so she has a son, and her son is called Zuma. For us, as South Africans, we are like, as in the person who was our president, Jacob Zuma. And so we're just like, I don't know how that connects to your child who's American, but okay. That's why I think I am not as sentimental when it comes to names. The world is so exposed to different cultures and different people because we all watch television and movies and stuff like that. And it's literally just like, I liked this name. I liked hearing it. I liked the sound of it. And that's why I'm going to call my kid that. I 100% agree also with Kasia in the sense that when I did my baking show, it was set in England. So I was very adamant to have the majority of my characters have names that at least do sound English. And it's always nice when you do have people from England to be like, yep, nope. I do have people who still condemn me for my main character's name. But I was like, no, because I gave a reason for why it doesn't sound British. Okay, don't come for me. I think it all just kind of depends on how you justify naming your characters. Do you, Sarah, because you do write fantasy, do you ever like blend names together?
Oh, all the time. I came up with a name of one character because my husband came across a meme that made him mix up his own name and it came out sounding really cool. And so I was like, well, I'm going to use that now for this character. I definitely don't stick to single cultures. It's one of the things that bothered my very first beta reader ever, who read my first manuscript ever, hated my first few chapters and wouldn't read on because of the names. She was like, the names confuse me. The names are from different cultures. I don't know if I'm reading something from this country or this country. I'm like, none of them. It's a made up world. It's not from a country that you know. And you do find that in a lot of sci-fi and in fantasy where the names don't necessarily come from the same cultures. I haven't had anybody else have a problem with any of the names. I just moved on from that. But yeah, especially when I'm creating a new naming convention for a world, I will take ideas from different names and squish them together or twist them around. And so you might see a name that is reminiscent of a name that you would recognize in our world.
So you're one of those people who writes their character names in a way that when you read it, you have no idea how to pronounce it. And when you listen, you have no idea how to spell it.
I might be guilty, yes.
So then you're definitely going to have to be one of those authors who has to make a reel and put it on Instagram once your book is released to tell us how it should be pronounced.
Yeah, or like a glossary that they put sometimes in the beginning of the book.
I do write those out actually. And when I use names like, I use a lot of Natali names in one of my, and a lot of people have no idea how to pronounce those at all. So I do put those phonetic pronunciations for those real names. I didn't make it up. It actually does have a real world pronunciation. So let's give you that.
In South Africa, we have a lot of different cultures. We have a lot of different people who live there. That's why we are kind of called the Rainbow Nation, because we're such diverse. And a lot of the Black people have their culture name, but then they pick a different name. And sometimes it's something as simplistic as gift or tiger. Yes, it kind of probably also had to do with apartheid and like when white people couldn't pronounce their names and they're just like, give me a simplistic name. They would have these beautiful names. I won't know how to pronounce it because I don't speak Zulu or Sotho. I mean, if you hear it enough times, I can kind of pronounce that with a terrible click. I think that is also very interesting. But I mean, it's the same with like our Afrikaans names. Like, for example, my sister is Susanna Josephine, but we call her Junai.
Yeah, often you can get away with a complicated name if you want it to be super authentic, but then you give your character nicknames so that the reader doesn't have to all the time pronounce the complicated name. I've seen it a lot with the Spanish characters, for example.
They always find it so funny when you literally have a character who has a 3-letter name and someone still finds a name to nickname them. I'm like, how?
That opens up another can of naming your characters for me. I have a YA book that I've written where a lot of the names were short 3-letter names. And I had a beta reader come back to me and say, these names feel too formulaic. Why do they all only have one syllable? Why are they all just 3 letters? I need something fancier, something bigger. They're not even the same. Like, they start with different letters, they end with different letters. It's very clear who's who. And so I've had to think about that as I've created characters and thought, okay, is this really their name, or can I kind of finagle it and make it a little longer so that they're not all the same beat pattern? And I think that's really what he was telling me. When people are reading something, there is a tonality and a music to what you're reading. And if it feels too strict and stringent, it gets boring. And so they want variety. And that's what he was asking for, was that variety in the pattern of the reading.
That does make sense. And this is opposite of what you did. But when you have characters whose name just kind of sounds so similar, like one is Cam and one is Cat or something like that. And so then readers are like, that is way too close to each other, like change it. And oh my gosh, I have to tell you this very sad story because I'm still mourning it. I had two characters, okay, and one's name was Rosie and the other one was Ruth, okay, and they weren't the main characters. They were kind of like the side characters, but they still both had like big influences in the story. My beta readers were like, no, those names are too similar about it. And I was like, sorry, what do you mean? I know exactly who they are. I know exactly what I am talking about. And they're like, no, like readers are going to stop reading because they get confused. And I was like, does this mean I have to change my one character's name? And she was like, yep. I have never in my life had such a hard time as I had having to change one of my characters' names. Do you know how hard it is to change a character's name once you've invested a whole life and a whole personality into that character?
Yeah.
I feel for you, my poor heart.
Yeah, but they definitely were right because people get confused, especially with side characters, especially when they're introduced in kind of a rapid fire manner. Then there's too many people. I don't know who is who. I had this problem with Fourth Wing, I think. I listened to it. I didn't read, so I didn't see the names with my eyes. I think by book 2, I kind of knew who was who. But in book 1, there were all of these students with all of the different names, and I was always confused who is saying what and who's doing what. I still liked the book, but like, yeah, it was a lot. It was. I'm just thinking of naming like the side characters. It's hard to name the main characters, but with the side characters, I have to think about what is a name that I'm not gonna use probably for any main character,
I
or
hear you.
like don't care about much. Something simple, something like doesn't have the main character energy to it or something.
On the same note, though, I'm thinking to myself, okay, but I don't want it to be like too common, like a Michelle or a Stefani.
Is that your list of 2 common names? Really?
Michelle and Stefani, yeah, that was very common when I was growing up. I don't want them to have like 2 common names because as a writer, even though you say like this is a standalone and that's the only story, I mean, there is always a possibility that one of your side characters might come crawling into your mind one day and they're like, I want a main character role. And then you're stuck
Yes.
with Bob. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with Bob as a main character? What?
Yeah, okay, you're right here. You're definitely right. Then you have to invent Bob as maybe Bob is a nickname and his actual name is something else, but everybody's calling him Bob.
Basically.
Because yeah, I wouldn't want to write a novel with Bob as the MMC.
Right?
For sure. No offense to any Bobs out there.
I have a space opera that I wrote, and at one point there is a character named Bob in the space opera. So when I was looking at the notes, and that was like, there are certain names you can't use in certain genres, like Bob in fantasy. I'm like, want to bet? And Bob was supposed to be just this little minor character for my main character to show something that she's doing. And then he ends up getting married to one of the other character's sisters. And so he never goes away. And this Bob is he's just there.
Bob's there now.
Bob's your uncle, like literally. I actually have a main character who I named her something very specific, and I'm not going to say it. I named her something very specific for specific reasons. I had to change it because I let people read the book who have dirtier minds than me, and they could not stop laughing about the name. I ended up having to change the name. It made me sad.
In the very, very beginning of the first draft of the very first book that I was writing, I had, I think, main character named Max or something, and then I decided to change the name to Evan. That name also has a history behind it, but like, yeah. I named him Max only for a reason that it could be like a cute nickname together with the FMC. But then I thought, Max, nah, that's not really, I don't really feel him like Max.
So I don't know what you guys do when you have to change your names, but I kid you not, I was literally sitting through my novel and I was like, let's go with Sarah. And then I would change my entire script and then I would have to read an entire like chapter with Sarah as the character. And I'm like, No, not vibing with Sarah. Okay, next one. Michelle. Then I would read the entire chapter again, and I'm like, no, Michelle's not hitting for me either. It was horrible. Like, would you do it, Sarah?
I don't have one in this new house yet, but all the houses
Mm.
that I've lived in, I put a permanent whiteboard on the wall somewhere in the house, and I use that to make lists. And so when I'm trying to name something, I will put the character I'm trying to name, and then I'll just list names that could be that character until I've got no other ideas. And then I just start crossing ones out that don't feel good until I come
Mm.
down to a couple of them. And then I send those names to my critique partners. And my critique
Smart.
partners often pick the final name. Actually, when I've done it that way, they've always picked a really good name. And I'm like, I love it. You love it. That's it.
Nice. Okay. So I found this interesting article. So it is from writersofthefuture.com. And she basically just talks about like how she finds names and things like that. So I'm going to go through it and then we can see how you to feel about it. So first of all, she was like, the name just pops up. And I was like, yep, that can happen.
That works.
Sarah just walks past someone going through Starbucks and she's like, yep. So the second one that she said is she will often write without a name and then she will just have a placeholder. And I love that because I do that so many times and I was literally doing that today. I have spoken in previous episodes about when you don't have a name for something, when you don't have description you have for a scene that you want to write right now, you only write TK next to each other. And then once you've written your entire draft and you want to go back and start like filling all those little gaps, you can type in TK and all those things that you're missing comes out. And so I do that with names. I'm like, yeah, do I know what this dude's name is? No, but I'm like TK. Or as she would say, like in brackets, she would be like sister of the bride or something like that, to just know who you are talking about, but also not having to stress about like the name, so you can just continue with all the ideas that you want to write down.
I like doing it that way for names better than just the same generic thing, because it makes it easier when I do pick the name to be able to put parentheses MC's sister, replace all of this with this name, and then it only takes out that character's name and leaves all the other ones that have their own specific tag. When I send it to my alpha readers and to my creative partners, then they don't get lost in the narrative of who's saying what, and they can go through it more smoothly. That's just what makes sense to me. I don't have to search through every single one to make sure I got all the names right.
Interesting. I think in my case, I can have placeholders, but mostly not with names. I like to have names. I would give people temporary names and then see if they stick or not by the end, if I still like it or not. And then I go and replace. I only had one, I think, placeholder in my first novel, which was I had a placeholder for a company name. The thing is why I remembered it, because I kept calling him the Doodle guy, and the Doodle was the name of the company, the placeholder. I couldn't use it because Doodle is an actual company that exists and it's quite famous. So I cannot write with empty names or with like without names. I feel like I don't have a person to write about. Basically, how I see that the name sticks or not is mostly when I start writing, you use sometimes he or she, and sometimes you use the name, right? Like you pepper it in so that people still know what's going on. And when I have to write possessives, like now I have Christina, so Jake's. And when I write a lot of possessives, it doesn't sound good to me. I'm like, nah, he needs a different name. She needs a different name, because like it doesn't work.
I saw this video on Instagram once where it was this guy who's trying to pick a name for his child that's going to be born. And it was the most brilliant like Instagram thing that I've ever seen, because he would literally fake scenarios and then just call out names. So for example, he would be trying to do the laundry or something like that, and he would be yelling like, Petronella, get off the couch. And he's like, yeah, no, not vibing with that one. And then next he's like, Jeremiah, get off. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm liking Jeremiah. This works for me. So I was like, well, that's a different way to do that.
Like you're treating them like your kids.
Yeah. When you're in romance, you also have to imagine other types of situations where a name could be called out, and it also has to sound nice. Sometimes I read an MMC name, I'm like, no way I would have said that. Like, no. Yeah, I also wanted to mention And in Russian-based languages, it's also important when you choose a name to think about how it's going to sound as a middle name. So we use patronymic as a middle name, so mostly the man's name. So the child of that man will have the father's name in the middle between the first name and the last name. And so if you pick something super interesting, try how it sounds in a patronymic. Sometimes it's really not nice. You're just dooming your child to not a very nice life with that kind of name.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's those little things that you need to kind of think about if you decide to pick a certain name or a certain culture or something like that. She also says here that what you can do is that if you decide to write a novel in New Zealand, like just type in New Zealand names, or if you are writing a novel in Brazil, type Brazilian names, and then that would be an easy way for you to find names. It kind of all just depends on like what genre you're writing, if it's like a historical fiction or if it's a contemporary romance, because then you're like, okay, what year was the character born? And then you just type in popular names from that year. I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Never thought of it.
That's actually quite important because I had a conversation with a friend who's an author. She's Italian, and I asked her about like advice about the name of an Italian character that I had, and she told me right away, no, this is a name for an old guy. Don't call him that.
Wow.
And she gave me like a list of other names. Like it's not a bad name, but if an Italian person reads it, he's gonna imagine a grandpa or something. So like, do not do that.
I love that. And it's so funny because, you know, those names that you connect with old men, I'm like, they were babies at some point.
There's a lot of names here in the United States that when I was growing up, that's your grandma's name, that are now little kids' names. And so you have to be able to ride that tide of ebb and flow of names, popularity, things like that.
I also sometimes have to check weirdly whether a particular name is a popular pet name, like dog name. I had this thing where a woman's name, like a very popular woman's name in my country, was a popular dog's name in Argentina. I'm like, what?
Though, can I just say, you as an animal owner have the wonderful opportunity to name it anything you can possibly think of, and then you go pick a human name. I'm like, why? That could have been Fireball.
And instead he's Richard, like, you know?
Literally, I'm just like, you should not be a fantasy writer because no, like what are you doing with your life? So the last thing she kind of mentions on her list is that have a list of names that you like. And I absolutely 1000% do that. And that's what my notes app is for in my on my phone. If I hear a name, I'm like, want it, putting it down. So I keep forgetting where I put my list. I'm like, I could have sworn it was on my notes. And now I don't know anymore, but it's fine. It'll eventually show up.
I just have scrolls and scrolls of screenshots of names and their meanings and things like that. One of the things for fantasy writers for names, if you're the type of fantasy writer that sticks with your generic species, meaning they're elves or they're dark elves or they're dwarves, things like that, you can use fantasy name generators that are out there. Just Google fantasy name generator, and a lot of them will say, oh, what culture are you going for? And you can put in, oh, it's a dwarf culture, it's a dragon culture, and it'll pull up hundreds of different names for you that you can just scroll through and find a good one that matches what the readers would expect to see as the naming convention of that species. If you create your own species, then it becomes harder to use those generators simply because you're also coming up with your own naming convention, which is great.
But then you can blend the names together.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us today, Kasia. It has been a fun conversation, and I wish that we could talk more because I feel like names is one of those things that every author has a very strong opinion on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. I chose this topic specifically because I was like, oh, character names. That's amazing. I can speak for 2 hours about character names. So yeah, thanks a lot. It was so much fun.
We like to keep it short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you like what we are doing here and you enjoy the topics that we are discussing, but especially if you like the guests that we have on to share these topics with us, go follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on Twitter/X and TikTok at Podcast Tea Tales. And go to that purple icon on your device and go give us 5 stars and tell us how you have found naming your characters. And help us go up, up, up It's our moment.
And if you're looking for any of the links to reach Kasia and her social media, they will be in the show notes. Happy writing!
Bye.